Welcome to Open House. Today's guest is Bonnie Roseman, and we were in a coaching session with the other top agents at Living Room Realty, and Bonnie was like, I think CMAs are part of my magic. So that's what spurred this series that we're doing on CMAs and how some of our top agents perform a CMA, do a CMA. And I'm so excited to hear about this magic, Bonnie.
Well, thanks for having me on the podcast.
Absolutely. So let's just start with, you have really impressive stats when we talk about listings. So this year to date, how many homes have you sold and what's been your average market time?
14 year to date. And the average market time is 5.3 or so, 5.28 something.
So five days and maybe one last sleepless night, and then you have it sold.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah. The goal for me is to average less than a week.
That's amazing.
And to try not to ever go 2 weeks.
Yeah.
If I can pull that off.
So you have to be really strategic, and your clients have to be, and they're an important part of that team.
Definitely.
To get there. So first off, to get those kind of results, what is your philosophy on pricing?
I think understanding what you're selling is the most important thing. And that's going to affect everything. What listings you use for data to set your price, who your audience is, how you're going to describe the property, what you're going to showcase, what extra close-up photos you might have. Really, like, understanding what you're selling and who you'd be selling it to is kind of the key to all the things. And it works outward from there. So, for example, I try to figure out on each property what's sort of the essence, the key thing that makes this property special compared to every other property. And of course, there's plenty of overlap that homes do have. But for example, a house might be right next door, be the same size, be the same age, but they might not be the same at all. Yeah. One might be a Mediterranean, one might be a ranch, one might be all about the garden, one might be all about the finished basement, one might have balconies. Those might be totally different audiences. If you have something with minimal stairs, you might be focused on, my fellow boomers. Mm-hmm. I'm a late boomer. But, if you have something that has a lot of original period detail, that's really going to fire some people up. They're going to pay more for having that original detail. Somebody else may pay more because something is brand new or freshly remodeled. So I think kind of when you come into the industry and they teach you about how to price a house, they're like, oh, look for things that are nearby. They tell you a mile or whatever, half mile, whatever the person teaching you says, and about the same size, maybe figure the age. And that feels very superficial to me and, misleading, really. Mm-hmm. So if I'm pricing ranch-style homes, I try not to include properties that have an upstairs because it's a different audience. Mm-hmm. I will sometimes go back and look at what is right near the property as well, because, of course, that is important, what's happening in that little microeconomy in that space. But I start by trying to figure out what is the most important thing. If every home pretty much in a neighborhood has a driveway and a garage, you're going to have to ding a property much harder that doesn't have off-street parking. But if it's sort of some do, some don't, that may not have much impact. If nobody has a garage and you have the one that has the garage, that garage may have a lot of value because it's very special. So really digging into the nuance and the details and going from there.
That's going to be really difficult because that's not really a rule book. It's not really, I know hosting open houses, people come in and be like, what's the square footage? Mm-hmm. I've got a calculation. And I would laugh because I'm like, oh, I haven't seen anything in Portland really sell based purely on square footage, unless we're talking about maybe some condos, some particular properties. But so it makes it an art form. How did you learn that art of like how to evaluate and when to flux and when to adjust and when not to?
Many years ago, I had a really special client. He was He was an elderly person who I became kind of friends with, and he had had a lot of rental properties. He lived in Woodlawn. He was born on this particular block of Oneonta, and he still owned the house where he was born, and his parents had built the house next door. He lived in that one. He owned like 4 in a row in that house, plus a number around the Northeast area. And as he was needing to part with those properties, some of them were in pretty rough condition, different things. And so I kind of got an accelerated, like, there are a lot of these. I need to make them go quickly. I need to really be able to assess what will make them sell when maybe some other things are not. It's also really how I learned a lot about how to handle multiple offers in a way that everybody feels like they came through it in a pretty decent way. Just kind of an accelerated course. And that was probably, I don't know, 30 years ago or something. And that has really, really helped me. And I think, a couple of times early on in my career, I didn't understand what I had. And so I maybe thought, oh, this address is so exciting. It should be this high price because there are expensive homes nearby. And then when the market didn't reflect that back, and I had to stop and say, where did I miss the mark? And recognize that, if you don't have great taste, if you don't have fabulous colors, if you don't have excellent condition, it could be exactly the same. It could be the difference of a coat of paint, and it might be an entirely different result if you don't get something priced where it needs to be for what it actually is. Not what it could be, but what it actually is.
Yeah, you have a pretty large team. And how do you train them to understand value? Like, what would you say to that new agent that's like, okay, I want to do a really good job for my clients. I know being able to come up with a value range is important. Like, what should I do? Like, what would you tell them, spend the next few months of your career just like honing in and doing?
Yeah. So I have previously had people as an exercise, have them do it. And then we compare. I do one, they do one. And actually, I do have a team member now who's got almost 5 years in the business, but we're pretty new to working together. And we have been doing that where my teammate does a CMA, I do a CMA, and we compare notes. And sometimes they're quite similar. But we did have one just in the last couple of days that I called and I said, I don't think we used a single comp in common. We are not seeing this property the same way. And so we went back and we analyzed it, and it had a lot to do with the details of the property, the age of the property, because it's built in 2010 with all these 1920s elements, transom windows and beautiful woodwork and all of these things. But it is built in 2010 and surrounded by old homes. So it wasn't a straightforward, what do you pick? So I didn't limit myself to that neighborhood. I chose similar neighborhoods. So it's Piedmont, but, I looked in Woodlawn and I looked in Concordia and I looked, all around it for those other newer builds that weren't cookie cutter, which, really, it's really just dicing it down to something so specific. And it did make a huge difference. Tens of thousands of dollars difference in how we looked at that. So it's a process. We're working on that right now, actually, how to do that. And I think I always value having more opinions because I'm just a person, and I may not see every possible thing. So having somebody else, look and say, I really think X is going to be an issue. So I slow down and think about that. I know it's funny because several years ago, I sold a home and the listing agent had shared that she had had such a hard time pricing it because she couldn't find any other homes that had no ensuite bathroom in the neighborhood. All the similar homes had ensuite bathrooms and this one didn't. And I was like, to me, that is like not an important feature of this home. Mm-hmm. It's a home that was built in 1942. It's very classic. And there are a lot of homes around it that are not classic, that are just sort of, mishmash of a little contemporary, a little dated 70s, a little this, that, and the other. And so when I priced it for my buyer to make sure they were paying an okay price, I didn't think about ensuite bathrooms, maybe as a fourth tier thought adjustment. But primarily I was looking for what are the other classic 30s and 40s homes, not 50s, not 20s, but literally those similar vintage era homes in similar locations. And it's funny because those people just called me. It's been, several years since they bought the house, and they're now thinking they may want to move next year. And so my teammate, we each did a CMA, and they said the same thing. They said, what about no ensuite? And I'm like, let's not worry about that. Let's worry about the condition. The bathroom that is up there needs remodeling. Let's help them understand that if they paint the exterior of the house and remodel the bathroom so that it's at the level of the rest of the home, how much more money they'll get. That's a big part of pricing, is figuring out, in the end, the house that you put on the market, it is somebody's home. It does have all of this history, and it also is a product. Mm-hmm. And the consumers that are out there are looking at many products. They're looking at all the different homes that they can choose that are in or near their price range. And that has to do with the location, the condition, the size, the charm, the view, the way it smells, the vibe, the light that's streaming through the window, things that are almost impossible to price except for from your gut, from your experience and your gut. And it does take time of experiencing that and seeing like, wow, homes that have windows in most of the rooms on 3 sides where you can see through from one end to the other and you're getting morning and afternoon, like they are more popular than homes that most of the windows are on the north side. Like there's not any check mark somewhere that's going to tell you how much to adjust for better lighting, but the buyers will tell you they need more light.
Yeah. And so wise too, you had brought up that you're doing CMA for your sellers, but you'll also be doing those for your buyers.
Every time.
So you're looking at value and judging it, and you're not just taking it at face value of what a listing agent's come up with as you help prepare that offer. So you're getting this experience on being able to pinpoint value on every single transaction.
Yes. It's sometimes a less formal presentation of that data because it's more like a workbook than an ongoing reference. We're working on this house today, and if they get this house, that value is going to go away. They're not going to need it again. They're not looking back in a month as they're getting ready. So it's not necessarily as pretty.
Yeah.
But we do every time look into that. And I see the listing price as the beginning of the conversation. So the seller says, hi, my house is for sale. And how about this? And then the buyers get to say, oh, I'm interested in your house. How about this? And the sellers get to say, well, maybe, maybe not, but how about this? So if another buyer says more than your buyer says, they're going to get the house in most cases, unless you have really exceptional terms or some kind of emotional draw. Sometimes those things happen. Sometimes you do see something that's unexpected. But in general, the buyer who's willing to make the strongest offer in price and terms will have the winning offer and get that house. So it is really important to understand, to help people know when they should pay more so that they get it and when they should hold. And if somebody else is willing to pay what I think is too much, then maybe they should be okay with walking away.
Letting it go.
Yeah.
I have a quick question because it's been brought up here a few times during open house sessions about Portlanders are too nice and they don't negotiate. So when knowing that, is that something that you hold to be primarily true? And if so, does that affect pricing strategy, or does it affect also strategy with your buyers?
I think you have to factor in the length of time on the market and since a price change. So if a property has been through its second weekend and not had any offers, I think there begins to be some room. I think if you've been through 4 weekends, there's more room. The longer it sits, the better. In most cases, unless it's been on the market a really long time, the difference still kind of needs to be what a seller would be likely to try next with a price reduction. So if somebody's asking $600 and you're like, I want to pay $550, your odds are not so great. But if you were to do 575 and they've been on a couple of weeks, they're pretty good because they're probably overthinking, shoot, I wasn't one of the ones that sold in the first week. I've hit my second week and I'm going to have to reduce my price. I guess I would try 575 next. So this person's giving me roughly what I would go for. Pretty decent chance.
Mm-hmm.
But it's true what you say. There's not like a big divide typically between list price, current list price. There's often a huge divide between the original list price, but the sellers need to have that experience of trying the different prices along the way when they've overpriced, and they will end up getting less than if they had asked the correct price in the beginning.
Are there, when you present a CMA, do you like to know what the seller expects to get before you prepare it? Or how does that look if I was to call, Bonnie, I want to list my house with you?
If they tell me, it adds a different level of pressure and second guessing because, I am a human being and I feel their experience and their journey and their potential disappointment. If the numbers aren't what they were hoping for, it's interesting. It can be helpful, but I think that the best evaluation is for me to just look at the market and the data, sit with what is this house? What should I be prioritizing? And then come in with a range. Most of the time I have a range. Occasionally I have a gut feeling. I'm like, I think this is the right magic number for this house. But most of the time I have a range, and I encourage sellers to go as low in the range as they would be able to live with one full-priced offer and accept an offer at that price. I never think anybody should have an asking price that they do not plan to accept. Even if odds are that the market will adjust up, you cannot count on that. And it's a bad vibe to put your home on the market and then somebody brings you full price and you're like, I don't want to sell because I thought I was going to get more. So, go as low as you can tolerate if you only get full price. But going as low as you can stand within that range is going to allow the market to do its work and get you the best, not only the best price, but also the best terms. And those terms can really affect your bottom line. When things are competitive and buyers are covering the risk of a low appraisal, limiting their ability to negotiate for repairs, potentially releasing earnest money to help ensure that they're in there to the finish line, all sorts of things that can really improve your experience and your bottom line. And sometimes people come up with really creative things to try to win. And that only happens if you start at the low end. If you start at the high end, you are going to lose the benefit of allowing market forces to work for you. Because so many homes, good ones, do sell for more than asking, we have ourselves in a sort of a catch-22. If you ask what a house should sell for, most of the people who can afford it are not going to look at it unless it sits around because they don't feel they can compete. They don't have the margin to go up. So on that house that should sell at 6, you're asking 6, you might be getting offers from the people who can go up to 630 or something. But if you were to ask, 579 or 589, then you would be getting those people, the 620, 530 people, but also the people who are hoping and dreaming that maybe they'll be able to buy it for under 6. So you have more people competing, and that's where the market forces of almost an auction mentality kick in and really sift out what's the best you're going to do.
That is so well explained. I'm sitting here just thinking, no wonder you've been a top agent for decades. You've been doing this a long time. Is there anything that if you could wave a magic wand, you'd want to change about the home selling process?
I wish it was more equitable. And from all perspectives, for the clients and for the agents as well. Like, I help a lot of people that need a lot of help. And mostly, over time, I have charged them about the same as I charge the people who don't need that much help. And that doesn't really feel equitable. I'm kind of working through this in my mind right now, thinking about developing possibly a menu of choices. Do you need project management or you don't? if you're going to hand over keys to a house that's in great shape and has great taste, and, we don't have to do a whole bunch of work before the realtor work of, photos, staging, that kind of routine things, that's a very different experience. I have a house right now, a couple of them that we've been, nursing towards the market, arranging for the floors to be refinished and countertops to be changed and paint colors and suggesting appliances that will fit and suggesting the colors and, basically serving as the designer and the project manager and all of those things. And so I would like to figure out an equitable way to provide the services people need to maximize their investment, but also to be a little more fair. I'd also love to have a magical adjustment that would help me do my CMAs much faster so that I could, because I spend way too much time on it to get to that magic. But I would love to have something that I felt was more reliable on, well, what does it do if you add a bathroom? What does it do if all 3 bedrooms are upstairs instead of divided? Because, we know families with young kids, those bedrooms upstairs, 3 bedrooms together with 1 or 2 bathrooms upstairs, so hard to come by. And it puts a premium on it. But there's nothing out there that gives you any way to quantify that. You kind of have to just go with your gut. There's not really a good way to extract that information about some of these different things that really do make a difference.
You're pointing again to like the art of this business that comes with the amount of experience that you have. And you're probably seeing like, oh, wow, like I have all of this experience and know-how. And as you look to your team, like you said, somewhere 5 years, that's a lot of time in an industry to still see like how far they would have to go to develop the same amount of like information, experience, knowledge, know-how that you have. Can you think of any ways that, an eager agent could accelerate that experience or information?
I think getting out and seeing lots of property, showing property, going even just on your own and following, maybe put them on your watch list, different kinds of properties so that you're internalizing what the experience was inside a place and then what did they actually get versus what they were asking. Because, really, that's what the years of experience have brought me. But I think you could accelerate that by just not limiting yourself to the business you're doing, but just making that a part of your own training is you just get out and see lots of houses and then follow through to the end and pay attention. What did that one go for? And did they have to make a lot of changes to get to whatever that price is? Also, I think, learning, just always continuing to learn, always continuing to learn. I have some folks right now that they have a detached ADU. And I was sort of scratching my head. I was like, these 2 things, it's this super contemporary detached ADU and then this old-fashioned lived-in kind of bungalow. And it doesn't really feel like the same buyer. It feels like they're dragging each other's price down because they are not one vision. And so I proposed, what about doing a condo conversion so we can sell them separately so that the person who wants that modern home will pay the most because they're not having to deal with that older home. And the person who wants the house doesn't have to be like, oh, I have this to pay for this big, expensive ADU. And so they were like, what? But I think it was like, maybe a $20,000, $25,000 investment for maybe a $200,000 to $300,000 difference
That's
in value
extraordinary.
across the 2 dwellings. It's specific to this place that it's so much. It's because one faces one street and the other faces the other street. They each have their own address. It really lends itself. And then they wrote back to me and they said, hey, we met with somebody and they told us about, the mid-size land divisions and maybe we can divide and be a detached duplex and then convert, So I'm like, oh, let me relate to that. what do I know about that? And then going back and comparing, like, oh, that's the same as when you do one of these newer townhomes on these things. And like, I hadn't thought of it that way. It was new information. So being ready to always keep learning.
Yeah.
It's not like you're going to hit a day, oh, you're 10 years in, you got your certificate of knowledge and that's it. No, I'm at almost 35. And that was like, oh, yeah, I have to think about how much difference does it make if you're getting fee simple versus with some easements for common areas versus you have a condo that's almost nothing expense-wise with this neighbor. Okay, there's some difference there, but like there's no data.
Yeah.
It's just gut feeling. You have to just keep looking at learning new things.
I love that because that is what keeps me showing up for this job, as it is always different. Like we're learning new things and codes and rules change and
all the time.
You get to kind of change with it and help people set the very best strategies for them and advocate for that, meet those goals. So over the span of your career, you must have used a lot of different tools to actually create a CMA. How important do you think any of those tools are, or what do you like to use now? Any tricks or
there is room
magic?
For improvement.
Yeah,
there is definitely room for improvement. It's kind of funny, as a company here at Living Room. I don't know what year it was, but at some point we embraced the MoxieWorks system, and it's very pretty. What it provides is very pretty, and personally, not being a graphs person, I kind of look at the graphs and I'm like, I don't know, does that mean anything to anybody or not? It looks like dots on a page, but some people relate to that. I'm more into the narrative. I try to give them both because brains are different. But right before we took on using the MoxieWorks system, and I don't even remember the name of it, I had been testing another system and it was ugly, but it had the best actual function that I had ever experienced in a CMA tool. It allowed you to rank individual properties. So you could include things like, say, they want to see that house that's next door or across the street that has no bearing on their value. They want to see it on the report because they're familiar with it and it's in their neighborhood. You can put it on there and tell it not to have it impact your value. And then you can take the one that you think is the most and the ones that are second, ones that are third, and it would do the math.
Oh, so it kind of weigh them for you.
It would weight them. And I thought that was really cool, but they had a very, very ugly presentation. So that was kind of a bummer because, I like nice aesthetics. We here at Living Room, we love nice aesthetics. I mean, that is a part of our brand. Is that we do things in a beautiful way.
They have to be relevant, and the tool has to work.
I have never really found CMA software that I trust enough to build a CMA within it. I build my CMA by going to the MLS, where I have the full range of information that is available, and I hand select the properties that I want to include. And then I load them into whatever CMA software I'm using to make a report for somebody. And I would love something that I could rely on it and its search fields to have the depth and breadth of information that I could just start in one place and type in the different things I want to try and do it in different ways. Because a lot of times I'll do 3 or 4 different searches and keep adding things that are from the different perspective. First I'm going with all the 1 levels to compare to that ranch. Then I'm going with all the things that are in the immediate neighborhood. Then I'm going in things that are, maybe they have like a 200-foot attic, but there's sort of that little Cape Cod thing. They're not that different than the ranch. I might be trying all different approaches until I feel I have the right mix to understand. And I'd love that. Something that you could just build it cumulatively and keep adding instead of manually tracking everything you need and loading it in.
I just have this vision of you as like a painter. And I don't know that any kind of software is ever going to give you just that right color match because you know exactly. You have enough experience to be able to just trust those instincts and the experience and know just how to weigh it.
One of the things that I've started doing is I add a page to the CMA where I put in, what does Realtor.com say your house is worth? What does Zillow say your house is worth? Both the estimate and the range. Same for Redfin. I'll do 1 to 3 of the automated value modules and put those in. And then I'll go to the Altos report for the zip code and show them like how many have had price reductions. We have neighborhoods with 50 and 60% price reductions. You know, that's shocking to people. The days on market, it is shocking if you look at it. Just by reading a CMA, you're never going to absorb that. So I try to give them a page that's not personal. It's not even about their house at all. It's just, here's your education on what the market is saying, what the world is seeing, what people out there are going to find and the sources they're looking at. Now let's look at what I'm sharing about your house in that context so people kind of can open their ears and their mind before they start looking at the data. And I find that really helpful.
That's got to be really grounding for a client. Just like, okay, here, give me
for
context.
Better and worse. For better and worse.
Yeah, this is the canvas we're painting on.
Yeah.
Any insights, other insights you believe are important for creating an effective CMA that our listeners might be looking to harness or to harvest more nuggets from your knowledge?
Just go deep. I mean, that's kind of the same thing I've been saying, but don't just go with, oh, here's the average price per foot and here's how many feet it is. Like at the minimum, figure out, is there one of these properties or 3 of these properties in the list of comps that are most like this house? And then look at the high and low of those. You know, if you have a list and there are some really like off the chain low or high, knock them out. Go to the things that seem like, you know, if something is $500 a square foot and something is $200 a square foot, but almost everything is $300 to $365. Well, just look at $300 to $365, unless you really think you have the outlier. You know, don't let those outliers skew things for you.
Stay within the field.
Yeah. It all really comes back to that kernel of really understand what you are working on. What is this property you're working on? What makes it different than the rest?
Well, obviously, with your average market time of less than 5.5 days, what you're doing is working. I really appreciate the results and the service that you bring to the clientele here and to your business. And thank you so much for being willing to share your expertise and knowledge and experience with the listeners today.
Anytime.
Thanks, Bonnie.
Thank you.